You're listening to Olivia's Book Club, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
Welcome to Olivia's Book Club, and I am your host, Olivia Fierro. And what do you know it? It's a new year, readers. So this is exciting to start working through our TBR lists and start deciding what are we going to read first of our many books through 2023. Maybe top of your TBR will be this one by our guest today this week. Mary Kubica is a New York Times bestselling author of 8 suspense thrillers so far, including most recently Local Woman Missing. Her books have been translated, how cool is this, into more than 30 languages and sold more than 2 million copies around the world. Pretty exciting stuff and a long way from the classroom. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Her very latest one, new for you, is Just the Nicest Couple, out January 10th. And by the way, Arizona listeners and viewers, if you are local, guess what? She's going to be local for her pub day. She'll be in Scottsdale at the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, so make a note of it and do not miss her visit here. And she's going to be very strategic, I believe, relocating from Illinois in January to Scottsdale. Smart book strategy. We have way better weather, at least that time of year. So, Mary, congratulations, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm very excited to talk to you. Just the Nicest Couple, focusing on 2 oh-so-nice couples, at least appearance-wise, of course, aren't we all? We've got Christian and Lily and Nina and Jake, and the ladies being friends, colleagues, friendly, teachers at the same school, their spouses, of course, that type of, friendship that we get when we couple up and do the double dates. Everything hunky-dory until one of them goes missing. So take it from here. Sell this book for me, Mary.
I'll do my best. So there, like you said, there are 2 different couples. We have Lily and Christian, and then Jake and Nina. And Lily and Christian are just like your perfect couple. They're incredibly in love. They're really happy. They've just recently purchased the home of their dreams, and Lily is finally pregnant after having infertility struggles for a number of years. So they're just in a really good place with their marriage and individually, and they're just looking forward to their future and starting their family. Nina and Jake, on the other hand, have a marriage that's really on the rocks. They're really at each other's throats quite a bit. Jake is a neurosurgeon, so he works these really long, stressful hours. And when he's not physically home, or when he is physically home, he's like not mentally there. He's still thinking about and focused on work. Nina herself is kind of pulled away mentally from the marriage too. Her mother is getting older and she's starting to have some health issues. The worst of which is that she's slowly going blind. Mm-hmm. And so she relies on Nina more and more for support and for help and to, help her run errands and just to take care of her. And Jake has some feelings about this. He doesn't like that his wife is always gone and taking care of her mother. So all of this just adds so much tension to their marriage. And then one day, Jake goes missing. He doesn't come home from work one night, and Nina is sure that it has something to do with this big blow up that they had the night before. And so she's sure he's just somewhere blowing off steam and that he'll be home in a day or two once he's kind of calmed down. But then, a couple days becomes 5 days, and things start to happen that make Nina think maybe he's not just somewhere blowing off steam. Maybe something has actually happened to him. But Lily is the one that thinks she may have been the last one to see him before he went missing. And she confesses to her husband, Christian, what happened. And the 2 of them decide that they will do anything to keep the truth from coming out. So what we really have is a cat and mouse game, one woman who's desperate to find her missing husband and another couple who will do anything to stop that from happening.
Well, I love the dynamics of the book, especially in that And this is the first time that I'm reading you, even though everybody was talking about Local Woman Missing, so that's still on my stack. But I mean, boy, do you jump right into plot, and that is awesome because I mean, a lot of times we're reading a kind of domestic or suspenseful thriller, and there's a lot of buildup. You are an expert at making us know these characters, really quickly and making action happen and tension right away off the bat. So that's obviously a strategy. When you're sitting down, as I understand, you don't outline everything, which blows my mind. So you're starting with the disappearance, you're starting with the argument, you're starting where?
Yeah, so I don't. You're right. I don't plot anything. And I usually, anytime I start one of my books, I start with a problem, just something that needs to be solved. So in this case, it was that, Jake is gone and Lily, believes she was the last one to see him. And so I start there. And for me, I'm glad that you pointed out about the characters, because characterization is so important to me. I think that, readers need to just really feel connected to them. It doesn't mean they have to agree with everything they're doing. And you probably won't, especially with this book, but you have to feel like that they're real and authentic, and you want to be with them for this journey. So I work very hard on my characters, but I actually don't write the book in the same way that you would read it. And I haven't for any of my books. I take one of those narrators at a time and write his or her entire story from beginning to end. And then I jump back and pick up with another narrator. So in this case, we hear from Christian and Nina in this story. So I started with Christian's storyline and I wrote his whole story. So that way I can just really, focus on like what's going on in his life and who he is as a character and how he presents his wife and other characters to us. And I can just build it that way. And, I start with this problem. So he realized, Lily confesses something to him. And so, he being this loving spouse will do anything to protect his wife. And so I just kind of take it from there and let one thing, sort of naturally progress to another. And as I do, I start to figure out maybe how this thing is going to resolve. And then when I reached the end of Christian's story, I went back and I picked up with Nina and wrote her story in its entirety.
That is fascinating to me. And it also, because when you get to be in the two different people and you're seeing these relationships and also the friendship dynamic and work environments and what have you from these different perspectives, you get so much insight into at least what they perceive their reality to be and how they feel about their partner. So we know that Christian adores Lily. We know that when he sees her across a room, he knows that nobody compares. He feels protective of her. There's a delicate quality to her. They're on a journey that is fragile and kind of tenuous and is hard on couples. And so it makes him even more loving and protective of her. And so there's a gentleness to the way that he observes his wife all the time, kind of watching her, almost like when he comes home from work. It made me think of sort of, somebody who's watching a beautiful bird or worried about, the nuances of something or someone that is very, very precious. Like she's very precious to him and needs his protection. And then Nina, on the other hand, feels much stronger, a little edgier. She's the foil to a husband who you're giving up a lot. You're giving up a lot of your time and maybe some of your power in a relationship, but in turn, you're getting the prestige and the gorgeous house and all of the stuff that comes from being with a surgeon. So we get a really good glimpse into these people. She's very softened, though, by the fact that she's really doing her very best to take care of her mother in a really difficult time. Talk to me as best you can about how your time as a teacher relates to writing these characters, because you also did a very clever thing, and I wish I would have pulled the passages. It was showing the two women in their classrooms or at the same school. Nina is more experienced, but they both have a completely different attitude about a particular day at school, in the classroom, and the kids. And it just kind of says everything. It says so much about them. It just gives a reader a real strong perspective of knowing them and their differences.
Yeah, I would love to. And I love your description of the characters. You got them right on the head. And I just love that and appreciate how much you grasped from them. So yeah, being a teacher, I love pulling like some parts of my life into my stories. It just makes it, it's write what you know, they say. And so whenever I can put some part of my personal life in there, still in a very fictional way, I do. But as you said, Nina and Lily are really very different in the classroom. Nina is the more experienced, and Lily is a number of years younger than her. Nina was Lily's mentor when she first started teaching, but they have really changed. And especially at this point in the book, Nina is really kind of coming undone through the pages. She is a very She is a really strong character, but when her husband goes missing, that really reaches her on an emotional level. And she is stretched thin as well, taking care of her mother. So we see her start to unravel a little bit. And so she's definitely having issues in the classroom. What's going on in her personal life, of course, is going to spread into her professional life. And so we see her struggle to, maintain control in the classroom. And she has a student teacher that she's trying to be a good model for. But she's really, really struggling. And and then we see her too, just some of her interactions and relationships with other teachers and sort of how that affects her life. Lily, just sort of has this graceful, just really warm sense about her. And you can see that she really bonds and connects with her students kind of on a different level. And there's sort of an ease that happens in the classroom. Now she, like I said earlier, is pregnant and she's experiencing morning sickness and things like that sort of she's struggling with on a daily basis. But there is, again, just this naturalness. There are times that Nina comes to visit her in the classroom and she maybe watches for a minute what's going on. And Lily just has like total control, and the kids seem to look up to her.
Yeah, I know that I would be more of a Nina in the classroom than a Lily. I know myself well enough to know that. So I'm not judging Nina too much. Were you a hybrid of these two, depending on the day or the year, or?
Yeah, or the class. Yeah, absolutely. You always get, those students that are just, some of them really push your buttons a little bit more and test your patience and all of that. And then there are some that just do everything that you ask of them. And so it depends, on my mood, how I felt on a given day. And the kids too, there are days that they're just really hyper, and then it's harder to get, everybody controlled, or some days that they're just a little quieter and, whatever. So it depends definitely on the day and on the students.
Yeah, I feel for teachers, especially with I thought about, I think Halloween was a Sunday or a Monday this year, whatever. They had school the next day, and I'm thinking, oh, God bless them. I mean, what an absolute nightmare. There is no chance. There is no chance for learning. It's yeah. They're all sugared up and stayed up really, really late.
Absolutely.
So when you went from teaching to becoming a mom, going through all of the emotions of a big life change, you obviously knew that you had stories to tell. Talk to me about the time when you first kind of sat down and said, I've got a book in me. I mean, and also you've got this unique style of how you're able to put these stories together. Is that how you were doing it right away? Were you just starting kind of flowing free like that? Did you have that kind of trust in yourself?
So I started writing when I was young. It was just one of those things, when I was an adolescent, that I kind of picked up as a hobby and I loved to do, but it never crossed my mind that I would want to write professionally one day. That was just, like putting my words in books and putting them out there for people to read was totally beyond me. But it was one of those things that from the time I was like 10 years old, I just always did. When I was teaching, I would come home, and if it was, a quiet evening or on the weekends and I had some time, I was always writing. But things really changed when it was 2005 and I finished the school year. I was pregnant with my daughter and I decided to take some time off teaching then to start my family. And my daughter was like weeks old, which now many years later, in retrospect, I don't know how I did this, but she was like weeks old when I got the ideas for my first published book, The Good Girl. And so, anytime that she was napping or discontent, or, I had her like in the crook of one arm and I'm typing with the other hand, I would write. And the ideas for The Good Girl just kind of came to me in a way that nothing had before. I fell in love with that book in a way that I hadn't anything that I had written prior. And the writing style, I mean, it's since that book, since The Good Girl, my writing style has really always been the same. And it came to me. I don't know, I can't explain it. But it was one of those things that I just tried. It felt right in the moment and it worked for that book. And then I realized it just worked for me. And so I've never tried to change it. But so I wrote The Good Girl. I did it totally in secrecy. I didn't tell anybody other than my husband I was working on this book, but I wouldn't let him read it. I just knew, at some point we shared a computer. He might come across, some interesting internet searches or the document itself.
Is she trying to kill me? What's going on?
Right. So I did tell him about it, but I wouldn't let him read it. It took me 5 years to write, but it was the first thing that when I finished it, I really wanted to put it out there and see if I could sell it. So again, I didn't let anybody read it, but I wrote up a query letter and I sent it out to all these literary agents. All of them rejected it. I mean, I sent it to like almost 100 literary agents and every single one of them rejected it. And, you know, I was heartbroken, but I think that I was also expecting that result. Even though I loved the book so much, I knew that, you know, the odds were against me. But then 2 years passed since all of those rejections. And one day I received an out of the blue email from one of the agents who had previously rejected it. And, you know, she wondered if it was still available and if I had sold it. And it just so happens that she was working as an assistant agent at the time. And she read The Good Girl, loved it, but she couldn't get the agent that she worked for on board. And she wasn't in a position to represent herself. So she had to pass. But within those next 2 years, she was promoted to an agent and remembered The Good Girl and reached back out to see if it was available. So it was really, you know, a dream come true. That was kind of the start of my career.
That is so cool. That is an incredible story too, because I mean, that is, it reminds you how many factors are going into which books get selected and which authors, you know, are able to ascend in this way. And there could be somebody rooting for you behind the scenes and you just never have any idea, right?
Absolutely. And every time I talk to aspiring authors, you know, I let them know I was one person away from this never happening. So you've got to keep searching for your one person.
Isn't it interesting, too, that you were able to craft that first novel in a time when most of us would say, oh, it's a miracle that I'm even, you know, washing my hands after using the restroom or whatever, fill in the blank of whatever, because you're exhausted and you're just, you know, you feel like you can barely keep it together. And you were managing to start this amazing new thing, your life as a mom, and start this amazing new thing, your life as an author. It was like this, all of the creative life force or whatever kind of intersected for you at the perfect time.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, and now that same daughter is 17 years old and I have, you know, a bulk of time. She's at school all day and I have a 15-year-old son, but I have a bulk of time during my day to write. But I think that when you are, you know, when you're so motivated to do something, and even if you have, you know, just a little bit of time to do it, if that desire is so great, then you get it done. And I think that that's kind of what happens now, because now at my, you know, all these years later, I don't know how I did it.
Youth, right? Like, I don't know. Maybe you were just really committed to never returning to the classroom. There must have been one kid who just is really who you really have to thank. You were like such a jerk that I knew I needed a second path.
I love it.
Do you spend a lot of time outdoors? It feels like the outdoors here and this space that we go to hike and walk, and also the views of the outdoors from these homes and these lives and the way that they're able to observe nature but also be observed potentially by others is a big part, another character kind of in this movie. So is or book, excuse me. I'm sure to be a movie eventually. Is that a big part of your life?
It is actually. I'm a runner. I've run a couple marathons. And so I spend a lot of time outdoors, and especially, you know, during that marathon training, those, you know, weekends long runs, there's a lot of time to just take in nature and to think. And the forest preserve that is a very integral part of this book is actually based on a forest preserve close to me. And it's one of the places that, you know, I did many of my runs when I was training for my marathon. So it's near and dear to my heart. And so when I am running, I'm just constantly observing and I'm plotting. You know, running is a wonderful time for me to plot. So it does. It really works its way into all of my books.
Your books are not only wildly successful, but also kind of a hot properties right now, being optioned up to be brought to the screen in a variety of ways. So maybe I'm missing something. There might be an update, but you've got Local Woman Missing headed to, or at least optioned as a series. And I understand you are going to be one of the producers of that project, right?
Yes.
That's exciting. So that's the hands-on one. The Other Misses has been optioned by Netflix for a feature film, and also The Good Girl that we were just discussing has also been optioned. That would be a series, right?
Yes, correct. It's so incredibly exciting, to write a book. I don't, when I write my books, I just think of the book. I don't think of where they're gonna end up one day. But I mean, it's really a dream come true to imagine that one day, one of the stories that I have written will be on TV or on the big screen, or it's just beyond my wildest dreams.
I've talked to many authors who, they I guess learn over the years to not get like too hyped up over when these deals happen, because you really just never know if things are going to come to fruition. And also maybe you have no say so after the deal is signed over as to how the project will go. I think generally that's the case. But if you are going to be a little bit more involved potentially in Local Woman Missing, what is that going to look like for you?
Honestly, I don't know. I know the update that I have right now is that they have a screenwriter, and that they're looking to attach one of the lead female characters, and then take it to the next step. So as of right now, I haven't been overly involved, but I think that once things really get moving, that then I will be much more involved.
That's exciting. Let me bring you back to Just the Nicest Couple. As you are putting this, so it's so interesting to me. So you're writing out Christian's story, and you're writing out Nina's story, and we're talking about and looking for Lily and Jake, and remembering things and observing them, and sort of responding to these important partners in our lives. What flowed easiest for you? Are they equal? And do you ever, when you're sitting down to write something, do you ever find that you're writing another character's perspective that ends up being cut completely from your storytelling?
Yeah, so there's always one of the characters that I connect the most with the exception being Local and Missing. My novel before this one, I feel like I connected pretty equally to all of them. But with this book, it was actually Christian that I felt like I connected the most with, which might surprise listeners, just because he's the male and, Nina's the teacher. I definitely have more in common with Nina. But there's just something about Christian's, his personality, his like willingness to do anything and everything to protect his wife, that I could connect with. I think especially, as a mother and just wanting to like protect my own children and sort of that natural instinct. So I really felt like I connected with him the most. I have, throughout my books, one of the questions that I always ask myself, once I kind of figure out like, what is the problem that I want to solve in this book? What's, basically that key plot point? The next thing I always ask myself is who is going to tell the story? And all of my books have had multiple narrators. So I kind of think about the story and, how that's going to happen. And it has happened before that I have started a narrator. It didn't happen with this book. I was pretty set on Christian and Nina, but that I have started a book and then just realized maybe that's not the wrong person, or maybe that's not the right person, I'm sorry, to tell the story. Or another thing that I've kind of run into is, maybe this narrator has too many secrets that they can't kind of hold back from the audience. And so somebody else is going to have to tell the story, because otherwise, it's sort of hard for that person, that individual, to keep their secrets from the reader. So it's definitely something that I have to consider and have changed in the past.
Yeah, and readers are so, especially who love this genre of book, are so sophisticated. I mean, we're always like, oh, is this an unreliable narrator? Is this, what can I trust? And so that's kind of the fun part. I always think of it as kind of like a mental gymnastics, like this type of book, because, you're trying to outsmart the story, which, very rare, at least for me, never happens. But it is part of the fun of it. It's like, we put on our little detective caps and try to figure out, who might be lying to us. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why this is my favorite type of book to sit down to read, because it really takes you away, and it's delicious.
I completely agree. And, despite writing in this genre, most writers cannot, they fool me. I'm on page like 2, trying to figure out who did it and all of that. But despite like brainstorming plot twists myself, I can hardly ever find them in other writers' books. So I love it. It's so exhilarating.
Well, that is awesome, because that means that you don't lose the joy that you get out of reading just because you are a successful writer, which I always wonder. I always wonder if people have kind of a fear of sitting down with another book. Are those stories going to creep into your mind? Is it hard to step away for the next time that you're going to sit down to write? Will you tell me a little bit about what it's like when you do sit down to write? I mean, are you very specific about the time and the place, or are you just kind of wherever your ideas happen? And what happens if you have an idea in the middle of the night, or do you?
I always write them down, because no matter what I tell myself at 2 a.m., I will not remember them in the morning. So I've learned that. I usually have my phone on my nightstand, so I'll just open the notes app and jot something down. But so I'm an early morning writer, and it started out a necessity. When I had sold my first book and the next book was under contract with a deadline, my kids were still really young. My daughter was, I want to say, in kindergarten at that time, but my son was in preschool for a total of like 4 hours a week. So I knew that there was no way, and at that age, they're really hands-on, and so I knew that wasn't going to work. So I got in the habit of waking up at 5 a.m. every day, and I would write from usually like 5 to 7 a.m. That was about the time the kids would start waking up. And early on in those early years, that was it, 14 hours a week, that I had to write. And like I said earlier, when something, is you're pressed for time, but your desire is great, like I think you can make it happen in that little amount of time. That my routine has changed a little bit over the years, just, really dependent on the kids' school schedule and things like that. But there is no time that I like to write as much as that like 5 a.m. hours. I mean, it's even like if I'm under a tight deadline, it becomes 4 a.m. And I know it sounds crazy, but I love it. There is something, just my mind is so fresh then. Like I'm significantly more fresh at 4 a.m. than at noon. So, I will still get up really early and write. The only other thing that I really require or like is just quiet. I really, really do best when I mostly write at home, and I really just do best when my husband's at work and the kids are at school and it's quiet.
Yeah, I would imagine too, when the house is dark and things, or you're the only one kind of stirring, you're sort of in that space that we often find ourselves in a book like this, when you walk home and you're kind of assessing the house, and are you all alone, and what's the mood in the room, based on who might be home or not, or what happened last, and just that kind of quiet contemplative space where things could go in any direction. It's like a moment of opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love it.
So now, once you go on this book tour, do you immediately sit down to start writing again? Do you take a vacation? What happens between now and the next book?
Yeah, so it's interesting because, for my position, I finished this book about a year ago. So there's time after I finished writing it, for the cover art and, for early copies to go out to reviewers and things like that, just for the buzz to build. So there's definitely this big gap after I finish the book and before it comes out. And it's an exciting time, because I just love to see, early readers getting their first looks at it. And I love to see what the cover turns out as, and all of that. So, but it also gives me like a head start on the next book. So I have to say I'm about halfway through the next book. I don't have too much to say about it, just because it's so new still, and a lot of things to figure out. But I'm hoping to finish a draft by early spring, and would imagine that it would be out in 2024 sometime.
Wow. I just think that calendar schedule is just amazing to me. And I know that once people get into the rhythm of doing it, that's the way it works a lot. But it's just incredible. It's like to be creative and to be able to say, okay, I know I will be able to finish this at this if I do X, Y, and Z, is remarkable to someone who, is not necessarily disciplined enough with the time.
And every book is different, just like students in the classroom. Some cooperate and some don't. So the one I'm writing now, thank goodness, has been very cooperative.
That is good to know. Last question. Do you collaborate with other writers? Do you have a group of other, authors that you bounce ideas off of, or that you do early reading for, and vice versa? Or who are your creative people that you like to turn to as you're hashing out your final products?
Yeah, from a creative standpoint and sharing early drafts and things like that, Catherine McKenzie, Karma Brown, Jillian Cantor, there are a few that I definitely bounce ideas off of, and we read early versions of each other's work. But I have a very large network of authors that is like an emotional support system. Oh. Being a writer, we're at home, and, it's just us and our imaginary characters all the time. So it's so great. We don't have like a workplace to go to where we can, talk to other coworkers about things that are going on, or a good or a bad review, and all of that. So it's just wonderful to be able to connect with authors, online, in person, whenever there are conferences that we can go to. It's been kind of quiet, of course, the last few years, but as a result, a number of authors have just, we get together on Zoom sometimes to just chat and all of that. So I'm so grateful. I had no idea what to expect when I got into this business, if other authors would be welcoming or if there would be more of a competition there. And they're incredible, all authors. But I mean, the thriller community is just really, really wonderful.
It has seemed that way. And I think it's got to largely be based on the fact that we know if you love reading this genre, you want as many good books in this genre to come out. Like it's not this one and that means no others for the year or even for the month. I mean, there's room. People have jam-packed bookshelves for a good reason, because they want to consume a lot of whichever genre they enjoy. And so there's room for everybody who's ready to tell a good story.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with me. And it's, exciting to start off the new year. I mean, to have new books to talk about. And is there anything that you're particularly looking forward to, whether it's personally or maybe as a reader? Maybe there's a book that you're waiting to come out from somebody else in 2023 that's on your radar.
Yeah, I'm really excited to read Sarah Penner's new one, The London Sand Society. I want to say that that's out in April. And then Pam Jenoff has a new one coming out in February, codenamed Sapphire. So I'm really, really looking forward to those. They're a little bit more historical fiction. And I was a history teacher. So historical fiction and then, thrillers are definitely my go-to to read. So they're definitely on my radar.
Love historical fiction as well. Mary Kubica, you've helped me by saying, wait, it rhymes with Topeka, so Kubica.
Perfect.
I was practicing that, and then I had to blow it on the second try. Mary, what a great chance to talk to you. Thank you so much. The new book is Just the Nicest Couple, and of course, we'll be looking throughout the year and following for the soon-to-be adaptations of some of your other novels. So, Mary, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Fierro. Our producer is Margaret Stewart. You can send us an email with your thoughts or your book recommendations. Olivia's Book Club at azfamily.com is the address. And you can check out Olivia's Book Club on Facebook or find us on Instagram. Hello, Bookstagrammers, at olivias.bookclub. And Margaret is at Overbooked and Overdue. Make sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast and tell your friends. You can find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Amazon Music.
This is Olivia's Book Club, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.